Right, so you should have filled in this section at the top. Have a read through everything that you need to do. You need to write in black ink only. You can mark any of the stuff. Now, I prefer at this point for you not to write on the maps and the insert, just because I like to use them elsewhere. But in the real thing, I would encourage you to write all over the stuff that you're given. Please feel free to do so. Today, your piece of work is out of 46 marks. So it's only about half of a paper. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds now. And all I would like you to do is just carefully read through the instructions. You shouldn't have opened anything. You shouldn't have opened anything. Right. So first question. Okay, so if you can turn over, the first thing that it asks you to do is study figure 1. So it says on the insert. It doesn't necessarily have to say on the insert. So your first thing to do is get the insert out, turn over. It should look something like that. I'm going to give you a minute just to have a read through. At this point, if you'd like to make any notes at all, don't start answering the question. If you'd like to make any notes, use this space just here, just to write anything you think is going to be important. It should be that piece of information. You've got 60 seconds starting now. Just reading through, 60 seconds. So about 10 seconds. In 10 seconds I'm going to ask you to go back to the question paper. Okay, so question 1 asks you to suggest. That is your command word. Suggest means you need to make a point and explain. It doesn't necessarily have to be 2 sentences. It can be all in the same sentence. You need to find 2 things about the natural environment, and you need to say why it specifically attracts tourists. So what I'm looking for to get 2 marks, I am looking for 1 thing about the natural environment, and then a second thing about why it attracts tourists. You need to do that twice. One where it says number 1, one where it says number 2 to get all 4 marks. This shouldn't take you 4 minutes, it should only take you 3. So 3 minutes start now. about a minute left. So at this point, remember that even though you're not getting marks for your spelling, punctuation and grammar, the way you communicate is being judged throughout the whole thing. Okay, can you get ready to move on to your second question? Right, so second question again asks you to suggest. It talks about how the coastal area can be protected from overdevelopment. So what you need to do is identify one method you want to explain and then link to the coastal area being protected. So again, that's worth 4 marks. So your 4 marks you make 2 points, you explain it, make sure it links back, and then you try and do it for a second time. So it should be 2 short paragraphs I'm looking for. This is a little bit more writing. It should be taking you about 4 minutes. That 4 minutes starts now. So overdevelopment means things like too much tourism, too much industrial use, things like people polluting, it could be people littering, it could be things like swimming pool, chlorine being put out into the sea, it could be them drinking too much water, so there's not enough being replenished in the local area for people to drink, lots of different things. And all you need to say is, how do we protect against those things from happening? So how do we stop those things from happening? So you don't need to use an example either. There's no need to use an example. It's just one thing you think could happen and explain how it would protect. 30 seconds left on that one. Last 10. Okay, if you can just turn over quickly. This is a nice, easy one. It's a nice opportunity to gain yourself a little bit of time. It should really only take you about a minute to do this. You either know the answers to these or not. All you need to do is just put these key terms in the correct box. That's it. So you either know the answer or not. You don't have to define them. So just put them in the right place. 60 seconds, and you get the same number of marks as you did for the last one for writing for 4 minutes. So you just need to make sure you get the answers right. That's it. I'm not going to tell you what they are, though. Go. Okay, can you start to turn over now, please? Right. So we've got a really good amount of time left to go. We should look for an 8-mark question to take probably about 10 minutes. So you should have a good amount of time. Remember that you've got a lot of your marks riding on this. There will be 2 of them in the actual exam. There are 2 of them today, so we need to make sure that we complete those as much as possible. So this is really simple. So it does ask you to go back to figure 3. So we've got a little bit of time left to just study what they need to. So what I'd like you to do is just spend 30 seconds to a minute having a read through. And what I'd like you to do is start to use the space around your piece of work. Remember, you can put a neat line through it, just to start to think about what you know that could add to the information on figure 3. So you've done a case study on figure 3, and the reason that you're going to need your case study is because it says explain how managed retreat works. So in order to explain, you're going to need to use your Peel structure. So you should look to do maybe 2 or 3 point evidence explain link paragraphs. It just asks you to say how it works, so you can say what that's doing and how it's doing what it's doing. You must use figure 3. So in order to do that, I would suggest that you identify some of the words on figure 3 that you could bring into what you're going to say, and you need to use your own knowledge. Now, you were given a case study about a type of managed retreat, a specific place. I'm not going to tell you what it was called, but I will give you a clue. That's WWCS. Okay. Exactly. So you've done the revision about it, so you either know that again or you don't. So this is your major question. It's worth most of your marks. You should look to finish in about 10 minutes time, but actually you've got 11 minutes until we need to go on to the urban section, so you've got 11 minutes until this question needs to have been finished. I would suggest that you spend a little bit of time, maybe a minute, coming up with a plan about what your paragraphs are going to look like and what your key terms are going to need to be. No talking at all. So with about a little over a minute left to go, sorry, a little under 2 minutes left to go, please focus on that. They are your two key letters. So the explanation and link. Do not just describe. Do not just describe. Don't just tell me what managed retreat is. The question asks how it works. You need to explain how it works. Oh, and finally, please check through your work. Some of you in your last assessments almost seems to have some sort of moral obligation not to use capital letters. That will stop you getting degree marks. Little over 30 seconds left until we move on to the urban section. Finishing your sentence then, finish reading off. Okay, right, on to the urban section. Right then, ladies and gents, the first thing that you're asked to do is to study figure 4. Now they often do something really sneaky where they will put a map over a whole page, expect students not to read the question, expect them not to read something like this. They won't study it and they'll miss 2 marks that might be easy by doing things like not completing the graph. You're not asked to complete the graph here, but you are asked to read through the information. It shouldn't really take you a minute to do it, so I'm only going to give you 30 seconds before I move on. So at exactly 24 minutes I'm going to move on. So figure 4 is in there. You can read it. Right, so you can turn over. This is one of the sneaky things that they might ask you to do. They want you to describe the changes. So it's worth 2 marks, and it's on the graph between 1950 and 2020. It is in urban population, so you go back to the graph and you get your ruler and your pencil out, and you go across to 2020, and you draw a line up. You then go across from 2020 and you go across, and what you're going to do is you are going to make a point and use data. Now that should be to do with the trend. Now a common thing for people to get wrong in the actual exam is that they won't have read what the question asks, and they will go all the way up to 2050. You have not been asked to do that, and that's why I want you to draw on the graph. This should take you, having drawn on the graph, about 90 seconds. So to describe, it should take you about 90 seconds. So 90 seconds start now. You're just looking for the pattern and you're looking to use data. You can manipulate the data if you want to, talk about the range, talk about a percentage change. Right, ladies and gents, can you move on to the next question? Just finish the sentence that you're on. You can just listen to what I'm saying if you're just finishing off. Right. So you will get something usually on this paper to do with reading an Ordnance Survey map. You've got an Ordnance Survey map on A3. If you want to use the key for this one's on the back. It's a 4-mark question. And what you've been asked to do is to add 4 more pieces of evidence that show that the area that you have here is Shrewsbury Town Centre. So you should be able to identify Shrewsbury Town Centre on your map just from where the river goes. So the grey bit is the river, and what they're looking for you to do is to add some symbols and then annotate. And they're looking for you to have 4 annotations. So you don't necessarily have to draw every single symbol on, but you do need to add something to the map. Now this shouldn't take you, again, it shouldn't take you 4 minutes, it should only take you about 3 minutes, so I'm going to give you on my clock until the clock says 15 minutes left to go. Okay, so you've got about a minute left to go. You don't have to explain, but I would suggest that you annotate what it is. So you don't have to draw loads and loads and loads of things on. You could just draw one as an example, and then you could annotate with however many more of those things there are there. Remember that you're trying to show why you think this is the city centre. What is it on the map that shows that it's the city centre? But I'm going to move on. You need to be looking to move on in the next 40 seconds. You will need that time. You will need every minute of that time on the next two questions. Okay, you need to look at moving on right now. So, nice easy one. This is an opportunity for you just to explain how public transport can reduce traffic pressures in an urban area. You must talk about an example you've studied. You've studied loads of examples. You've studied one beginning with C. You've studied another one beginning with C, G, B. You may have done that as well. You are more than welcome to use others that we may not necessarily have studied. What you need to do is you need to use point, so say what's actually happened. You need to give me some information about it. I want you to explain what it does and then link it back. And the key thing is to reducing traffic pressure. Now we're under a little bit of a time constraint here because I've just looked at my clock. I've got 14 minutes left to go and I also have a big question left. So this should take you 5 minutes, remembering that we're now in a time, we've got time pressure left on the last one. We've taken extra time that we didn't necessarily need to use, but we wanted to use because the map skills are not necessarily something that come easy to us. So I'm going to move on at exactly 9 minutes left to go. About a minute left on this question. So you're looking at getting to the end of that answer now. Finishing the sentence that you're on. We're going to move on in 5. Okay, so the last question asks you to study figure 6. Figure 6 looks like that. You should take about a minute to do so. So your minute to do that, it's a little under a minute actually now because we're under a little bit of time pressure. Study figure 6 starts now. Right then, ladies and gents, so this is an 8-mark question, your last 8-mark question. It will be the last thing you'll do in the exam as well. It's trying to talk about sustainability. You need to know some key terms to do with sustainability and what sustainability actually is. There's no requirement to define it, and you don't necessarily get any marks for defining it. You can think about those 3 key words, social, economic and environmental. It doesn't necessarily just need to be environmental sustainability. You can use your own examples, and I would encourage you to do that, but it is not just an opportunity for you to talk about how one of your own examples became more sustainable. You need to try and use the evidence in your figure. You do that by quoting specific statistics or quoting something that they say. Now you've got a little bit, you're in again under a little bit of time pressure, so maybe if you can, 3 paragraphs, but 2 paragraphs that are well written are completely acceptable. It needs to all come back to the example that you've got. That's the last thing you'll do.